Sega has a long and storied history of arcade gun games. If you go back in their huge catalog, you'll find quite a few classic 2D, 3D, and superscalar games that used some form of gun-like weapon to take down its enemies. I was a pretty intense fan of the genre growing up because they were easily played by just about anyone. So whether it was a friend, a sibling, or a girlfriend, I always had someone to play with. When Sega's incredible Model 2 shooters began to drop, they instantly became some of my very favorite arcade titles to look out for. AM2's Virtua Cop 1 and 2 were so appealing, and the addition of 3D enemies and environments really upped the quality of the experience. In 1996, Sega AM1 released their very own Model 2 shooting game, and it was radically different from what we had seen before. The House of the Dead cobbled together a number of horror movie themes into one crazy story of a mad scientist releasing his grisly experiments upon the world. Having a great appreciation for zombie flicks, I was quite taken by its premise. The question was, did it live up to the sky-high standards set by Sega's previous releases? In this episode, we will be taking a look at the House of the Dead, talk a bit about the arcade and Saturn versions, and even go over the recently released trailer for the remake. I hope you guys enjoy my review of the House of the Dead. The story begins with a phone call letting you know that your fiancée Sophie is in grave danger. You arrive at the Curian mansion to find the entire place under siege from zombies and nearly a dozen other different types of murderous creations. You guys know the drill from there. Once under attack, you have a limited time to take care of your assailants. Since this is based on the engine that powered Virtua Cop 2, it again tracks where you hit the enemies, but this time, the damage is far more gruesome. You can blow off appendages, put holes through chests, and even completely decapitate your foes. That's right, the House of the Dead is not for those looking for squeaky clean entertainment for the whole family. Enemies don't just stand there to be blown away either. They run at you, throw weapons at you, and even bite. And that's not even considering the bigger bad guys that pop up from time to time. It took everything that was cool about Virtua Cop, added a mix of Eastern and Western horror, and created something special. It was also campy as could be, adding an additional layer of charm to its already great design. AM1 also capitalized on the branching paths of Virtua Cop 2 here, giving you multiple points where you could go different directions. This wasn't always as simple as shooting your own path. Sometimes you had situations where you could react to change where you go. Saving people could net you additional health, or take it away if you killed them. Finally, there are multiple endings here that are based on how well you play. You can save the girl, get her killed, or reach the unfortunate conclusion of not knowing at all. The visuals here were stunning in 1997. Hell, they're still impressive now. The environment is nothing less than perfect. The outside of the mansion is unsettling before you ever get in the place, and then you are presented with dank tunnels, hidden passages, and all sorts of areas that ultimately culminate in Curian's lab. There's a great amount of interaction within those areas as well. You can shoot pots and pans in the kitchen and blow away barrels and vases for hidden items. The enemies look great too. I really appreciated the ability to hit different areas of the body, particularly if that enemy had been carrying a weapon. The Model 2 had excellent textures at the time, so the detail was phenomenal. No matter where you looked, it was beautiful. It also ran at a buttery smooth frame rate that never stutters or dips. The variety in the areas you battle across is impressive as well. You really do feel as if it's a journey into the lair of a madman and his demented creatures. If you found this at the arcade back then, it was one of the best looking games in the room, and considering the vast amount of impressive software on Sega's Model 2, that's really saying something. The sound and music in this game is iconic. I mean, I bet many of you can close your eyes and hear the intro play in your mind quite easily. It sounded like a mix of a rock concert and an old horror movie, and those results couldn't have been any more perfect. Let's have a listen. When looking at the House of the Dead, it really is difficult to find a single thing wrong with it. If you enjoy this type of game, it's damn near perfect in its execution. The presentation was flawless, the gameplay had different paths and endings. The only real complaints you could level at it were the typical ones about how quickly it could be defeated or some bullshit about the simplicity of the genre itself. I had an absolute blast with it, and the multiplayer was virtually endless entertainment. Whenever I find one in the wild, I just gotta play it, if nothing more than to hear its familiar sounds and blast a zombie or two. Biggest complaint I have is that Sega took forever to actually give us a modern version of this game. Why was there no Wii version? I mean, they had a working Model 2 emulator for the machine and it had the perfect input method to play it. The remix does look interesting for what it's worth. The team at Megapixel Studio and Forever Entertainment look to bring the first game back from the dead with a fresh new coat of paint and additional content. I must say the trailer is quite exciting and looks pretty faithful to the original vision. Unfortunately, the Saturn was in its final stretch when the House of the Dead made its way home in 1998. Sega had switched gears to Dreamcast development at that point, so the project was handed off to Tantalus Interactive. This developer had worked on a number of Saturn projects already. They did the port of Wipeout in 1996. That had actually turned out fairly well. It wasn't quite as good as the PlayStation version on a technical level, but you still had to respect the results. Sega had also used them before on the Saturn version of Manx TT Superbike. That one looked impressively close to the arcade considering the huge chasm in power. Frankly, Tantalus seemed to have a fair hold on the Saturn's architecture, but man did the Saturn port here get butchered. Everything about its visuals were a complete downgrade. It was not close at all. Hell, it wasn't even in the same ballpark. Performance suffered as well. Members of Tantalus have spoken up in recent years and admitted that the development time had been quite limited, so there was little in the way of refinement to get a better end result. On the plus side, the gameplay itself is still rather fun, so this port is still worth looking into. It even has a few exclusive modes that weren't in the arcade. While it does support the Saturn's Virtua Gun and 3D analog pad, for some reason Sega axed shuttle mouse compatibility. Also be aware that the Japanese version of the Saturn game has the red blood cut out of it. In 1997, Japan had been rocked by the assault and murder of several children, so many companies reacted by censoring their releases. Tantalus also worked on a PC port at the time, the only other platform to see a release of this game. The House of the Dead came out the same year as Resident Evil, aiding in the revival of the zombie subgenre. I couldn't have been more happy to see it. That interest is what made me want to play Sega's new lightgun game, but the content is what made me a fan of it. It was everything I enjoyed about gun games, mixed with a personal favorite style of horror. After the release of the Saturn and PC ports in 1998, the House of the Dead would not be released again on anything. It didn't show up on the PlayStation 2 Sega Ages line, it didn't make it to the Wii or Xbox Live Arcade. Nearly 25 years would go by before Sega broke it back out, and that's the remake we discussed earlier. The House of the Dead has seen multiple sequels across multiple platforms, however, each one adding its own twist on the formula. If you guys would like to play it today, the Saturn captures the gameplay pretty well, but I honestly recommend you emulate it. You can run it in high resolution and use your mouse. You lose the lightgun appeal, but you can at least play it with a decent visual polish. Hopefully the new remake sparks some interest in the series again, and maybe Sega will bring home some of those arcade versions that remain unavailable. These games deserve a collection. Get on it, Sega. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.